This is a long overdue event, 15 months almost, right? And the last time my brother and I were here in Bakersfield was my mom's 89th birthday, which was almost exactly 2 years ago. So, welcome everyone. We're going to start with her favorite song.
We don't know why.
We don't know why it's her favorite song. And it's called A Man and a Woman, right? And it's from a movie that I don't know the name of.
A Man and a Woman.
Oh, thank you, John. 1967?
Janet.
All right, I'll turn it off when you start. So this is Ivan and Kathleen to play that song, and we'll go from there. Okay, so I'm going to somewhat briefly, in theory, go through the obituary in her life as much as I can. It's been a tough couple of years for all of us, so glad to see you all here. So many familiar faces. It's really nice. I want to take the time, before going further though, just to acknowledge other people that we lost in our family in that last year and a half. Mary Fowler, of course, Gwen, wherever Margie is, yeah. Paula Knight, some of you knew Paula. Nancy Clark recently, which was a tough one for our family. So I'll go through this, and let me just start with, my mom was a lot of things, as you guys probably know. We were really proud of her. She was a daughter and a wife and a mother and a grandmother, and then a great-grandmother. She was at first a student, maybe always a student, an educator, a wine expert, a hostess, a lot of things. And she was intelligent, attractive, well-educated, very social, and yes, where's Colin? She was talkative and argumentative and opinionated. I came from the grandson. So the early life, she was born in Riverside, California in 1931, moved to Pasadena. One thing a lot of people didn't know, her father worked for the Union Pacific, and in the Glendale group here, there used to be a trolley that ran from Union Station up through Glendale up to Montrose, through Eagle Rock. And UP bought that in the late 20s to compete with Southern Pacific. which has the big, beautiful rail station still in Glendale. And so they moved there, and he was the station agent for the electric trolley that went up and down between Pasadena and Union Station. So my mom lived in Pasadena for a few years and then moved to, help me Margie, Glen Oaks Canyon for a couple of years, and then built a house in Verdugo Woodlands, which was sort of near where Uncle Bill's house was, in that general area. So that's where she was a child. She was obviously smart. She skipped second grade. They moved her from first grade to third grade, which was a big thing back then. And then in high school, she went 2 years to Glendale High. My dad went to Hoover, so they were enemies from the start. And then her father got transferred to Birmingham, Michigan to be the Detroit UP station agent. So they moved to Michigan, and that's where she finished high school. She went to a high school called Baldwin High in Birmingham, Michigan, and she was the valedictorian, which I found out yesterday meant she was second best, not first best. So she always wanted to go to Pomona College because that's where our grandmother went. And she was one of the early women graduates, and she was Phi Beta Kappa at Pomona College, which she told Chris and I that 4 or 5 times every time we saw her. So my mom had some ideas about going to Pomona, but they lived in Detroit. So the college they could find that looked the most like Pomona was a college called Ohio Wesleyan, which is in Delaware, Ohio, which is near Columbus. Where's Rita? 30 miles north of Columbus, something like that. So that's where she went her first 2 years to college. That's where, in her words, she went from being a gawky teenager to an attractive college girl. Had her first boyfriend who took her to a dance at Annapolis, which she talked about a lot whenever she was mad at my dad and not taking her to the dance at Annapolis. And all we heard about was the great ice cream that they had in this town. So when Jerry and I were teenagers, she actually took us there to eat ice cream and to see her first college. So my grandfather then got transferred to San Francisco. Chris, if I'm wrong on this stuff, tell me afterwards. Okay, so in 1951, my mom was stuck in Delaware, Ohio. It was a 3-day train trip to get home, so she decided to transfer to the West Coast. And here was one of her few big errors in judgment. Instead of going to Cal, which was near Orinda, or even St. Mary's, she went to frickin' SC. We all went to Cal. I don't know if you knew that. But anyway, and there at SC, she majored in occupational therapy. This is when polio was at its peak. And so she was trying to help the community to help children. And so she was a child occupational therapy major. She was also Alpha Chi Omega, so she was a sorority girl. And her cousins, let's see, Margie's dad and uncle were there, particularly Uncle Bill, who was a couple years older than my mom, was in the engineering frat. What was the name of that, Gary? You remember? I have it written down, but I told you I wasn't going to look at these notes. Anyway, my dad was in the engineering frat, and so was Uncle Bill. My mom had reconnected with her cousins, so Uncle Bill introduced my mom to my dad. And it was a perfect union because he didn't like to talk and he listened, and she loved to talk and she didn't really like to listen. So it couldn't have been better. It was a nice match. So out of this mistake of not going to Cal, she got to meet my dad at SC. That's kind of how I look at it. All right, so other friends from SC, many who have passed, but I just thought I'd give them a shout out. Bill and Joy Krenz, Bill just passed recently. Ray and Margaret Erickson, the Lemkes, the Griffiths, the Davids, and their best friends were the Knights, Paula and Taylor, who they spent a lot of their partying and vacations with. So Mom graduated cum laude in occupational therapy, and then she had to get a certificate to be a licensed OT. So she rotated around and worked at Stanford University, I guess. Harvard General, City of Hope, those kind of places. Are you timing me? I'll quit right now. I didn't really want to do this. And somewhere in there, my dad got sent to South America. He missed her, she missed him. He came back and he proposed to her in the Stanford Hospital parking lot in pouring rain. And so they got married, moved to Bakersfield. This first place they worked was here. And then we get into their early life. So I'm on early adulthood. I got a long way to go here. So let's see here. So my dad's career, he was a petroleum engineer for Halliburton, and so he had to move a lot. So we went from Fullerton to La Mirada to Brea, to Ventura, to Brea, to Bakersfield, and then settled finally in Bakersfield when Gary and I were sort of junior high age. Along the way, my mom, she taught and volunteered. She both volunteered as an OT in hospitals, and she also taught at 4 or 5 different nursery schools while we lived in Brea. And so by the time she got to Bakersfield, she was sort of ready to do something more. So she came back in 1966. That's when we moved on Brookhaven Street, met Janet. Drive. Yes. Thanks, Susie. So, yeah, we were like the newcomers, but there were a lot of kids, a lot of fun families. We had a good time. We met the Van Tonagues and the Davises and Colsteads and Ann Garber, my favorite. You don't have to laugh at that. And my mom went to work at Bakersfield College, and she started as a lecturer, became an associate professor, went at night to UCLA to get her credential, and eventually was a full professor of child development at BC. And her big projects there was she was associated with the Head Start program at that point, and did 2 off-site nursery schools where young ladies could, ladies mostly back then, could become preschool teachers. And those were her big projects. There was one on Loma Street and one on 24th Street, when she took these old houses and turned into nursery schools sort of on her own dime. It was really nice. All right, so that was the BC years. Somewhere in there she got tired of teaching people how to be child development professors and decided that she'd teach people how to drink wine after they spent all days with their child. So she took a lot of wine classes. She took one from Robert Balzer. She took the World of Wines at BC. She took one from Fred Cherry. Leonard probably knows all this. And eventually went to the Sommelier School in San Francisco and was one of the first women to ever graduate from there. That brought on traveling the world, and they went to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Australia to taste wine. What a joke that was. Mexico to taste wine, New Zealand. They traveled the world under the guise of professional improvement so they could write it up, and drank and ate their way around the world. My mom came back and she liked entertaining and she liked the wine world, but she was tired of being a teacher. So in 1985, she retired from BC and she became a wine businesswoman. It started with doing wine lists for restaurants, that kind of thing. Became a brokerage business for a guy out of Benicia, a company out of Benicia, and sort of ended with her doing the wine marketing out of Fikes Market, which some of you might remember. Her greatest thrill in the wine world was being an officer in the Society of Wine Educators. That's where she met Jess Jackson and the Mondavis, and she felt like she was sort of one of the California wine people because of that. Never lost her taste for wine. We saw her fall 4 or 5 times because of wine in her later years, but she never gave it up. She wasn't about to give it up. a lot of other things. I mean, she did Elders College here. She had a classical music group that some of you know about. She loved jazz. She was a docent here at the Art Museum. She learned how to use a computer, which was amazing and difficult for Jerry and Brian, particularly Brian. But Brian's a computer expert. But she learned how to use it. She cataloged wines. She communicated with her family. It was actually kind of impressive. They traveled a little bit more. They went to Panama. They went to Alaska. They went to Norway. They went to Denmark. They basically saw all the world other than the Far East, I think, is the way you'd say it. And I think my dad saw that during World War II, so I didn't want to go back. That was kind of the deal. After my dad died, it was tough. Thank God for Leonard. Where is Leonard? Thank God for Leonard. Oh, there's not a greater man on the planet as far as I'm concerned. So, and she had to downsize her home. She had to move to assisted living. She was alone. She was not happy. She got a lot better because of Leonard and others. And I think it was actually a good time. It turned out to be a good time, even though my dad was gone. Janet wrote in the obit, and I thought this was just amazing. She said, Eloise was an elegant lady with an active mind and a zest for life. And I think that was true. In our family, she was known as the Wheeze dog. So it wasn't Mrs. Higgins, it wasn't Eloise, it wasn't Wheezy. She was the Wheeze dog to all of her grandkids, which was an interesting name for such an eloquent woman. So to sum it up, she loved jazz. She loved these candies called turtles. She loved shoes. I mean, she wore a size 9 narrow. And where's John? How many pairs of those fancy shoes, those Ferragamo shoes?
We gave away 50 pairs of Ferragamo shoes.
50 pairs of Ferragamo. No wonder my dad always complained about money, right? Yeah, she loved shoes. She loved clothes. She loved anything orange. She loved the color orange, including furniture and wall treatments. And she loved baked gooey hamburgers. That was an interesting dichotomy. She loved to cook. She loved wine. She loved her family. So she passed away a year and a half ago, December 21st, 2020. She had been in the hospital for 7 or 8 days from COVID. They were going to discharge her the day before because they thought she was fine. Then the next day, everything kind of went to, what's the right word to say in front of a group? Went downhill. Very good. Yeah, so she died on December 21st, 2020, and she's been laid to rest at Forest Lawn in Glendale. That's it for me, Jerry.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Ryan. The drink now. Is this thing working?
Yeah.
Wow. Hello, everybody. Obviously, thank you all for coming. I know some of you came from long distances, and it's kind of touching that you did. And as you all know, my mother would have just loved this as a party. And as my brother pointed out so accurately, she would have loved this because it was about her. But this is a perfect thing for her. In fact, as my brother said, we were thinking she was going to get discharged any day from the hospital. And then when we go collect her things later, there's notes about what she wants to have happen later. And this art museum event and the food from the kitchen were on her list. This is how she wanted to have a party. So this is all about Eloise. So I'll start with some thank yous. First, Jim, thank you so much. Excellent speaking and lots of detail that I either never knew or forgotten, maybe more likely the latter at this age. Anyway, thank you. And then we have a whole team working on this. Michelle did the slideshow and also the program. Donna did the Donna did the website and the invitation. She's way back there with little Ryder, who's 9 months old. If you haven't seen him yet, you've got to make a point to see him. Susan Barr for helping us with doing the flowers and the table decorations. Wonderful stuff. Ivan and Kathleen, thank you so much. I mean, that set the tone for the day. Perfect music for Eloise, so I'm honored to hear it. Again, thank you to Jeremy Brown in the kitchen for the food and the wine, and to Curtis here at the Art Museum for helping us get all this set up and being so good to work with. And maybe most of all, oh, I know, Joan. Joan made 150 cookies for us. And by extension, we also are very grateful that Rita didn't want our KitchenAid.
Yeah.
So then Joan got to be a cookie baker with gusto. And then most of all, thank you, Janet. Jenna was our field leader, our general. She would stay up to 2 in the morning finding pictures. I knew it was going to fit here. And coordinating everybody and calling up and making the to set up here and things like that. So I can't say enough about everything that you've done for us and for me. So thank you. You know, Janet retired a few years ago, but she doesn't like to not work. So this job, this party was a full-time job plus a whole lot of overtime. And she's not getting paid very well for it. But we can talk later. So anyway, Eloise, a couple of things I'll draw from Jim's remarks that kind of sort of delve into a little bit. The moving to Bakersfield in '66 was kind of a big thing because she had always done many of these sort of activities, helping with nursery schools and things like that when we were in school, but always home for us in the afternoons, you know, in Ventura and Brea and places like we live. We move up here, and I'm going to junior high, and Jen was more mature than I am anyway at that point. So she takes a full-time job. She told me she wrote a letter to Barbara Hoyt, who is the chairperson at the home ec department at DC, Bakersfield College, and then got the job. And so full-time job, but it still allowed her to be at home with us in the afternoons most of the time, so darn, we couldn't get into much trouble. But the fact that she did that, it was like all the rest of the moms that I knew stayed home. It was 1966 and earlier. And so the fact that she and my dad had a good job, was working and so on, and so she took the initiative and goes and gets this job, and I thought, and as I watched her work, it became like, okay, this is normal, even though some of our neighbors, Janet and other people on our street had moms who didn't work full-time. Kind of led me to, well, backing up a bit, the B seniors were kind of fun for us. We were sort of going up there all the time to sort of help with things. I remember putting in some sod in the infant care place next to the trailer where the infants were. Jim and I and Janet were painting some of those child care centers. The Loma one, we painted one room yellow, another one blue, stuff like that. So involved with her. And then one of my favorite memories was she had a night course she was teaching. And then every so often my dad would have to go do an all-nighter out of some oil rig someplace as a petroleum engineer doing charts and things. And so she took Jim and I with her to college. While she taught her class, she parked us over in the cooking classroom, I think it was, with a couple of tables. And so we're kind of sort of doing our homework, but mostly we were listening to Jim's little green transistor radio. And there were songs from the White Album there I remember, and I won't mention one that's a bad name country right now, but the other one was Happy, Today's Your Birthday. So that was kind of setting the scene of what it was like for us up there. So, you know, it was a kind of a neat sort of role modeling thing that I grew up thinking, well, you know, my mom's a strong, independent woman, and why shouldn't anybody be who's, you know, and got a job and can lead things and so on. So I was always, very respectful of that. And then the second thing, for theme coming out of Jim's talk, was that she was so interested in so many things culturally, with the wine and travel and art and music and jazz. So Jan and I were talking that she's even kind of gotten us to things that we would probably not have seen or thought about otherwise, that we were really glad we got to go to. Maybe the biggest example is the musical Hamilton at the Pantages, preceded by Dinner of Musso and Frank, so it was a hell of an evening. And then several exhibits at LACMA, from Cubist Picasso to Gehry architecture, things like that. And then of course wine. She got us even more interested in wine than ever, and travel and so on. So what I took from this, I just was always impressed that she always had this energy, this gung-ho spirit to go do things and go try new things. You read about something, go ahead and see it. Don't just say, yeah, maybe I'll see it, and don't. And so thanks to her, I think that I'm better about getting out there in the world and not just sitting home and watching sports or something. So anyway, that's, I think, it for me. So thank you very much. I think Joyce wanted to say a few things. Thank you.
Well, I don't usually speak to crowds, but I couldn't let this one go by. We met Eloise first at our music group, and we met every month to listen to music, drink wine, have hors d'oeuvres, have supper and dessert. And over the years, we got more and more involved in other things that Eloise was interested in, from architecture to art, to jazz, to museums, to art appreciation. And we, in later years, after Bob passed, Leonard and Stephen, myself, and Jeff Johnson would get together. I called us the cocktail crowd, and I called Eloise the cruise director. Because, as you well know, she coordinated better than anybody could imagine and knew what everybody was interested in and who else would enjoy that experience, like the going to Musso and Frank's and seeing the Hamilton play. We went on the bus with a few other friends, one time we went on the bus somewhere, one time we went in the car, but there was always interest, enthusiasm, and she definitely had an inquiring mind. So she loved to share that, and after we would get together and have interesting conversations and discussions, then it would be no surprise a day or two later for her to send us some research she'd done on one of the topics that we had been thinking about. I know all the family knows this. So the 60 plus people, the wine groups, the art associations, we had a marvelous time with her and really cherished the years we had with Eloise.
I'm next.
Well, for those that don't know me, I'm Colin, Eloise's oldest grandson. This is my wife, Erica. Jim and Joan are my parents. So we heard from Michael, Jerry, and my dad about my grandma's life, wonderful life, and we wanted to, share some stories from a grandchild's perspective. So the first thing I always think about my grandma is she used to always take us to fights when me, Kyle, and Jeff, and I mean, we'd show up, and she knew every person there, every worker, every patron, and as we heard, she loves to talk, and we'd be there for hours. And me and my brothers are wild, so we cause all sorts of trouble. But she always would buy us these gourmet cookies or chews from doors, so we just kind of battled through it and we would stay there. But I was always impressed how many people she knew, and this crowd itself shows you what kind of person she was. That there's so many people here. When I got a little older, when I turned 21, I really got to see kind of the wine side of her and the gourmet food. When I turned 21, she started giving wine memberships, which is the best gift you can give to someone who's 21. I would drink the wine immediately, usually the whole bottle I'd get, and we'd chat about it, and she'd tell me like the differences. I still don't understand wine, I just drink it, it's delicious. But she was passionate about it, and I love just talking to her about that kind of stuff. She also introduced me to gourmet food. Growing up, I did not like anything other than meat and potatoes, but she had all sorts of different, and delicious stuff. Led to some funny stories. One time she made tamales that was filled with rabbit, and it was Easter, so that was a little weird. But they were good, kind of. And it's certainly a great story. I don't know if she did it on purpose or what, but it was pretty good. Another thing she did when I was in college, she got me a gift card to Chez Panisse, which is probably the fanciest restaurant in Berkeley. She knew the owner there, big surprise, Alice Waters. She let Grandma knew everyone. But what was funny about it, she told me what to order, and it was all the stuff I'd never heard of. But, I'm like, whatever, I'll order whatever you say. It was great. The food was delicious until I got the bill, and my gift card from her only covered the tip. I had to pay everything else, so that wasn't great. The thing about my grandma is she loved family. Like, she came to every single event. You see these pictures. She came to every graduation, every birthday party, every holiday. Even in her later years, she came to Bryce and Maddie's, her great-grandchildren's birthdays. Thank you to Michelle and Brian often for going and picking her up in Bakersfield and bringing her down. And she just loved hanging out. You saw her reading books. She would sit with Bryce and read books for hours with them when she was, almost 90 years old, which I thought was so cool. So, that legacy of being tied with your family, I think us Higginses are very tight because of that. We love our company with each other, and I think it's a kind of a great legacy that hopefully we can pass along.
Very good.
Yeah, I just wanted to run with the themes. I mean, I got to know Eloise over 15 years with dating Colin, and something that was remarkable that I always kind of had a connection with is I'm also a teacher, and she was a pioneer of her generation. She reminds me a lot of my 94-year-old grandmother as well. The war kind of wives and meeting my grandmother and my grandfather also unfortunately went to USC. And so we had that bond together, and I think from any given moment that I saw Eloise, she tried to instill in me in that balance of taking care of a home, taking care of a family, while also managing your own identity and having this place outside of your home and being that educator. And I think as we pass it on, as Colin said, the effort that she took to be with family, to read with Bryce and Maddie, and even a little bit with us and teaching me a little bit about education. Even today, she's no longer with us, but Bryce and Maddie are walking around the hallways and reading the art and telling us about what they think. So she will be missed, and a great example of that is when I was sharing with my family. Everyone started telling stories about how Eloise would take them on the couch, and we would walk into birthday parties and she'd be sitting with our next door neighbors for hours and just telling them about her life stories. So her legacy lives on in our kids, in my family, and even in our neighbors. So, thank you.
Hello. Hi everyone, I'm Michelle, with Eloise's granddaughter. And I was lucky to have her in my life for many, many years. There are many stories I could share. and I'm going to share one in particular that has kind of established her as a legend among my friends. So it's about 7 years ago, around there, and she was down in LA to visit a friend. And so I was at work, and I was talking to my friends at work, like, Grandma's coming down, where should we go for dinner? She likes the nice places. And we ended up at a place called Milo and Olive, if you're ever in Santa Monica. Highly recommend. Brian, Donna, Grandma, and I had a lovely dinner, lots of wine, pizza. And at the end of the meal, the server came over and said, "Is there anything else I can get you?" And she asked for the port menu. And he said, "Unfortunately, we don't have any port." And she was in disbelief. "How can you not have port?" So we go, "It's okay, there's a Devmo down the street. Stop, next port." So we wrap up dinner. Brian, don't go home. I take her home to Devmo, and it's closed. Again, disbelief. How is it closed? It's the city. It should be open. 9:30 on a Tuesday. It's okay. There's a Bristol Farms across the street. I'll go there. Luckily, lots of port options at Bristol Farms. She gets her bottle of port. We go home. Pours a glass. Asks me if I want any. I'm like, "It's 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. I work tomorrow." Okay. She always had higher tolerance than I did, and I don't know how she did that. Lots of practice, I think. So the next day at work, my friends, "How did dinner go? Where'd you go?" And I tell them the story. And they're like, "So you had wine at dinner, and she made you get more wine. Wow, your grandma's so cool." And yeah, from that point on, she was forever known as Wine Grandma. People wanted to, when I was talking about her. And actually this last weekend, I was in Napa wine tasting with my friend for her birthday. And she met Eloise once, loved her, and did a little toast to her at a wine tasting, and then told the port story to the other friends who were there. So she still remembers it. And that's amazing. So, cheers to Eloise. Thanks you all for being here.
Hello, so my name is Brian. I'm another one of her grandkids. And as Uncle Jim mentioned earlier, if you don't know me, I'm a software engineer, which to Grandma meant I was her personal IT hotline. Nothing new, that's okay. And at first I thought it was annoying. I was in high school and then I was in college, and she'd call me on a Friday night. I'd spend 2 hours on the phone with her, teaching her how to save a document. And it was not great. But later on in life, I grew to like those times and like being able to teach her how to do things. So, it all started back in 2005 when I actually built her first computer. And it was originally intended to be for both of them. However, Granddad, who was a lifelong engineer, wanted nothing to do with it. And Grandma, who was an arts major originally, dove right in. And she thought it was the greatest thing she'd ever had, and she wanted to figure out how it worked and do all that. And that was great for me. After that, though, she quickly wanted more, so we got her set up with one of those free dial-up internet connection services, and she thought that was wonderful. She would email us all the time with that, and email probably a lot of you as well. But then we introduced her to how websites worked, and she's like, "Well, this is great, but everything's so slow." So we upgraded her internet to cable, and then she's like, "Oh, this is so cool. What's next?" So next for her was AIM. Anybody remembers AIM? But she was like, "I can message you instantly. This is great." But she never quite got the concept of how it worked. She'd still type up a full email linked message and then sign off immediately because we didn't respond instantly to her. She's like, "How come you never talk to me?" So that was fun. But
What's her AIM name?
We's Doggy,
There
of
we go.
course.
What was your license plate? We's Doggy.
Wine Mogo. So, but through it all, she kept wanting to learn more. She kept wanting to do more. So she needed a faster computer, and then she had a bigger monitor. And of course, all of this meant more time from me. But that was okay. I think one of my favorite questions from her was an email that simply said, "How do you get rid of the little picket fences in Excel?" And my dad and I are like, "Picket fences in Excel? What you talking about?" And then, for some people that may not make any sense. But for grandmom, obviously she meant all the little pound signs that were all together, which is what Excel does when the column is too many. So that day we laughed and we got to teach her how to widen the column in Excel so she could see the number, and that was amazing. But as time went on, she became more self-sufficient. You know, she asked me less and less questions or more complicated questions. She learned how to research things on her own, and you know, she'd print out the schedules of all of the grandkids' college football teams, so that way she could make sure to watch the important games and then talk to us about it afterwards. When I started traveling, she would always research where I was going, you know, print out a map of every town I was going to, print out my itinerary, and then of course Google, you know, points of interest along the way and tell me to go to them, and then demand why I didn't if I didn't go to them. And even most recently with the pandemic, she took on the challenge of learning how to Zoom with people and how to use FaceTime with her iPhone that we got her. And you know, even though we couldn't be with her very often in person, she could at least, you know, see us and we could talk to her and she could stay connected. And you know, looking back on it now, I think a large part of her desire to learn all this new technology was exactly to stay connected with all her friends and family and allow people to hear. You know, it's something I can't wait to tell my new son, Dad, and all the other funny stories about her, you know, when he gets older. So, thank you. I think at this time,
All right, so we're going to have like an open mic here. If you want to come up and say something, Spook, you can do it whenever you want. If you want to go first, that's fine. On the wine stuff, just as you can tell, wine was a big part of everything. So when we were kids, they'd go to Napa, my dad and my mom, and Jerry and I would be told to stay in the car. You know, with the windows cracked, thank God. And we didn't have screens back then. Like you look at Bryce here, all he does is look at screens when he's bored. So Jerry and I we would punch each other and then get into wrestling matches on the lawn in front of the winery while the parents were getting hammered, basically. So I always thought wine was very obnoxious. So in high school, when I became 21 at 16, as Mark knows, we just drank beer because wine was bad, because your parents like wine. But then I turned 21, I was at Berkeley, a few months before I met my lovely wife, Joan, and that's important. So I just turned 21 and a girl in the dorm said, let's go wine tasting. I said, I know how to do that. I know the wineries, I know what to ask for, I know how to bypass the tour and go to the tasting room. I had it down. And as I was walking out of the last winery with this girl, she started kissing me. And from that day on, I knew, take the girls to the wineries. and Joan wasn't our first date. Our second date was at a winery. Anyway, so that part paid off. So my mom was friends with all my friends, which was kind of amazing, even though she was so busy. And Mark Sandel here is one of my oldest friends. I think we met in fourth or fifth grade, in there somewhere.
I'm not counting out.
Yeah, he had more interaction with my mom the last 15 years than I did, because he's a Bakersfield guy. So, Mark?
Spooky, Spook. Well, you can tell we all have nicknames. Spooky, Spook, Breeze. Well, I'm a coach, so coach is usually long-winded. And I know that today was going to be a tough day for me emotionally, only because this is the final closure for all of us. And so I wrote a few things down, and I'm a little embarrassed. I have a brand new computer. It wouldn't make a copy. It wouldn't send to an email so I could have something paper. I should have done it on my pad anyway. So bear with me while I read it off of my computer. I'm very honored to be here. I got to see Eloise. I went to Brookdale, and it was one of the hardest days I've ever had when Jim called me and said, my mom passed, and COVID got her. So right now, just so I don't get emotional, because I have a tendency to do the people that I'm near and dear to my heart, so just bear with me just for a second. Let me type it in here. Talk amongst yourselves.
Get some more wine.
Did Brian help you out?
Yeah, Brian's here.
IT support is here. Yes, incredible.
Aha.
Yes, he's phenomenal. Yeah. Stay with Jimmy.
So I won't even be upset if you talk while you're in line. I'm just, because I'm loud, I don't even do this. See, I'm a coach, so I
No,
don't
we
need
want the
these,
mic.
but I'm gonna use it anyway. Again, my name's Mark Sample. I go by Spook or Spooky. And Jim will probably, or Breeze will be the first to tell you, I think because I was used to be his wife and a ghost. I don't know. I don't know why you called me that, but can you answer that question today?
Because you were a great dancer.
How do you signify being a great dancer with a nickname Spooky?
It was the 60s.
Oh, okay. That's all we're going to go on that one. If I don't read this, normally I can go off the top, but I know that if I'll miss something or it'll be longer than it should be because we've had a beautiful day here with the music, the tributes, and all the memories. And it's nice to see people I haven't seen in so long, Jerry and Jim and the boys and Joan and I met one of Jerry's closest friends from high school. So this is kind of a neat little reunion, and that's what these kind of are, is seeing people we haven't seen in so many years, and meeting those who are close to the people who's usually for the deceased. But I just hope my little diatribe today and of who Eloise was to me and us, you understand a little bit more from my side, because we've seen it with grandkids, with the boys. I hope you understand a little bit more about her from my perspective. I met her while I was in high school, or actually longer than that. It was like Jim said, it was probably in our grade school years. And my first time getting acquainted with her and Uncle, we used to call Bob, their dad and her husband, Uncle Bob. I wish I could say Aunt Eloise, but she was more like a mother figure to me, so I couldn't call her Aunt Eloise. When someone were to talk to me about them, or I would say, "Oh yeah, Mr. and Mrs. Higgins," it would be like seeing an episode of Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, and the Donna Reed Show, all wrapped up into one scene. It was. I thought this was going to be fun, getting to know her and them. Only because it was a respite from my home life, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you about how bad it was or how good it was, but going to the Higgins residence as a kid, it was like Disneyland to me. We got basketball, we had a pool, and she would dote on us with lemonade and "You hungry, Mark?" You know. So she even one time, I'll remember, she came out and said, "Hey, Jim, you forgot to get Mark a towel." She went and got a towel for me to dry off, so if you didn't want me to get cold. To me, I thought I made it. I made it to a family where I could hang out and I could feel like part of the American nuclear family. Because I did. Look how well the boys turned out. Well, half of them anyway. I'm not going to do that. As Jim and I's friendship grew over the years, I made it to the family, and I wanted to actually be adopted by. Now, obviously, that would never happen. But if I could ever get adopted into a family, this is where I want to be. Not only I was treated really good by Jim's brother, but I was treated really well by the parents. Almost made you feel like one of theirs. And I didn't get invited to dinners and such, feeling like I was a member of the Higgins clan than ever before. Eventually, as we all seemed to to have our experiences that some good things must come to an end. At least the frequency of my time at their house came to a little slow down. College beckoned Jim and I, and we went to separate ways. And we had to go find out what the world wanted us and where we were going to be the men of the world. I visited him at school, and this is before Joan, so, and after Joan. I'm not going to go there either because I know too much. No, I'm just kidding. And every time I come see him or I call him on the phone, usually when I come see him, because I'd have breaks from school and I'd go up, or this is during the summer, or he's living up there because he has a residence up there, I'd say, how's mom and dad? How's your mom and dad? And I think it kind of shocked him a little bit because I think, well, hey, we're here to have fun, you know, but they had such an impact on me. We carry on, and he built me on their lives that they were involved with, and I could find myself daydreaming about how I wished I was back at the Higgins compound, and long for, especially during my long dog days in Kansas winters. Kansas, who goes to school? Well, it's not Cal, sorry, and it's not USC or anybody else, but it's not Stanford, but it was dreary out there many times, and I thought my days at the Higgins residence and with Jim and Jerry had already left, and it was pretty lonely, and I just felt like he just longed to be back in the throes of some comfort, warmth, and their house was full of it all the time. Every time I would go to see them after Jim and I split up and went to school, not split up, but we went our different directions. And and when I was there, it's those things you remember. Like when I was playing football at Bakersfield College, we'd come out of the stadium locker room and I would smell pipe tobacco. It's just, it was when they could smoke in the stadium, and I could smell it even today. I could just smell it. When you come down the ramp, and anything I could see or smell, one thing takes me back to BC football, is pipe tobacco. Well, guess what else that pipe tobacco took me back to? Uncle Bob. I'm going to get through this. I know you did. I can do the same thing. I'm going to be like Jim. Well, over the years, occasional visits will become less and less, and I regret to this day, due to our busy lives, not keeping a little more closer visit and connection with Jim, Joan, and the boys, and Bob and Eloise. I enjoyed our time together while we were at Brookdale, and I was a veterans advocate and Brookdale was one of my main not accounts, but my places I'd go and talk to veterans. I didn't realize that Eloise was there. When I found out, I made multiple trips up to her apartment, and we went on lunch a couple of occasions, and it was so good to see her again. Multiple times I'd go up and she'd be asleep, but she left the door open. I think that was her way of letting me check on her. But in closing, I'm going to say, I remember the last time we had lunch at her favorite Mexican restaurant, and I took my friend over, and she was so impressed with how much of a class act she was, even in her elderly years. I mean, she dressed up to the T's, as we all know. She was always leaving her place impeccable. But I don't know if some of you have ever been to a ceremony, whether it's a wedding or a funeral or an anniversary or something. People give your names and acronyms, like this letter stands for this. Well, heck, I'm going to do that. So, because you know what? I have the microphone, so I can. First letter, W. Whoops, sorry. Oh, Wheezy, not Eloise. Well, see, this is prior to you guys. This is Eloise E, not dog. So I thought that wasn't appropriate, you know. So anyway, Jim and I and Larry and all the guys call it Wheezy. So I'm going to do this in the Wheezy acronym. So W obviously goes for wine-tastic. I learned more about her knowledge of wine than I probably would have ever learned how to ever not doing it all myself. So She was a very informative person regarding, as we all know, of her expertise and her studies of wine. E, everlasting. I always thought of her affectionately being sort of my adopted mom, even though I hadn't really heard or seen from her in a while, but she was there all the time in my heart. E is exquisite, wheezy, W-E-E, exquisite. She was impeccably dressed, and she was a picture of class and elegance, as we all know. S, it could be S or Z, but I chose there's not a lot of words Z, so let's go S. Very strong lady, and I'm sure most of you can attest to this. She had an inner strength that I wish I had. And Jim embarked on, and so many other people did too. Very intelligent, very intelligent. She was one of the most smartest women I've ever met. E, enduring. Her friendship to her friends and especially to me never wavered. She kept her attitude, her philosophies, and demeanor. Philosophy, that's probably a little bit of a dig to the what is it, Colin? Which one she has a little battle with? Yeah. And her demeanor was always constant up until she passed. I'm so proud to know her, and I'm a better man for it. Thank you.
Hey, before Susie starts, just one thing about Mark. Mark's a football coach, baseball coach, he works at BHS still, but he's very involved with veterans. He's raising funds for the World War II Memorial for Bakersfield for veterans, and he was close to my dad because of that. So Mark, thank you so much.
Well, like Jimmy said, I'm Susie Davis Barr, and I was a pipsqueak on the cul-de-sac. And I always got, poo-pooed away by everybody else because they were older and didn't want the little sister around. And Eloise always took me in. She taught me to love food because I helped her with wine tastings that she had at her house. She was there for me if there was drama at our house and I couldn't take it anymore. She was also there for me and Jimmy. When he didn't want to have gourmet food, he'd go down and have steak and potatoes Colin, at our house, and I'd go up and eat good food.
High five in the middle.
Yeah, that's right. So one thing about Eloise, so when I got older, I worked at the Monterey House Daycare Center. She, conned me into that. And, that's where I think I found my love for children was there. And, I teach art and yearbook journalism at a private school, and I haven't taught for a couple of years because I was injured. But Eloise was always honest. She was always straightforward. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. When you went to her with a problem or some, that you just needed to talk, and she loved to talk. That's probably where I get it. And I'm so thankful that now, because Janet married Jerry, that we're all family, because I loved her dearly. And one thing I want to say, before I get too upset, many of you probably don't know this, but my daughter, Jesselyn, is an ICU COVID nurse. And she was working the desk area when Eloise was in the hospital. Eloise was not her patient, but she saw that she was supposed to be released. And the next morning she saw the numbers and realized that Eloise wasn't going to make it. She called me up to have me pray, and then she talked to her manager, the higher up, and asked if she could go be with her, which, it doesn't happen. And so, just so you know, Eloise didn't pass by herself. My daughter was with her, held her hand the whole time. She talked about Jerry and Jimmy, and that she was, I'm like your granddaughter, and she passed in peace. And I just wanted to share that because Jessalyn was there. Yeah.
All right, who else?
I do.
Anybody? Nobody? Oh, Tim, thank God.
May even not even know. I've been Jerry's been Jim's since 1970, by proxy by 1970. And we went to high school, and I knew Janet then. And one of the things I most remember at Jerry and Janet's wedding, how many things happened in a life, and how many things happened to people. And I work in the theater, and Jerry and I bought a theater subscription, and we wanted to keep the third row center seats. So we resubscribe every year, even if the plays are terrible, which they often are. So the year there was the snowstorm, in Christmas picture, what, 19? Jerry and Janet kindly invited me to Christmas because I couldn't get to Bakersfield to see my mother. And I work in a business where you're gifted with liquor. I am having a glass of wine today in honor of Eloise, but otherwise I don't drink. So I had some aging champagne that I put in the refrigerator, and I brought it over to Christmas. And was it drinkable or was it vinegar? Should we drink it or toss the salad with it? And Eloise was so excited that there was this mystery game of the champagne. One was drinkable and one probably didn't end up in the salad either. So my mother passed around the same time Eloise did, and was Eloise in Memorial or Mercy? My mother was in Mercy. And so last Christmas, Brian very kindly invited me to Christmas, and I brought over, again, the last 2 bottles of champagne. Was it vinegar, or was it something to drink? And the evening was most wonderful, and I am most grateful to be part of their family. As Mark said, I am a member of that family, and they made it very clear to me. But there was something a little less fun about the Christmas because Eloise wasn't there, all excited to find out that it was vinegar. Thank you.
And that's true. Tim is part of the family, has been since I was about 13 years old, and I've just gotten his and Jerry's way. and Tim's had a couple of losses in the last couple of years, so our condolences to you. Who else? Anybody?
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, just a couple of quick memories. Of course, I knew Eloise from the music group, and when we would go out to dinner at various things, like attend the theater or something, obviously, no matter who was there, she was one that selected the wine. She discovered that I could do some handyman things. So it didn't take long. I get a phone call if the kitchen sink faucet would not shut off, or the dishwasher would send the water on the floor or something like that, and I would come over and remedy the situation. She always very quick to compensate me with bottles of wine, fine wine out of her cellar. It was worth it.
She sounds like a drunk, doesn't she? She was an educator and a student. Did you guys forget that? That's right. No, we had one night where she was face down on the linoleum, and Brian, mostly me, because Brian was embarrassed, had to lift her up. That took a lot of strength. All right, who else? Anybody? Anybody? Okay, let's drink some more wine. Let's first, oh, here we go.
I'm gonna say that. Good.
Oh my God.
I know, you don't even recognize me.
No, I do. Hi, Owen. Nice Nice to see you.
Hi, my name is Owen Jones, and most of you probably don't know who I am. Jerry and I met in 7th grade, right when the Higginses moved to Bakersfield. And he and I became very close, good friends. And I practically lived, Mark, I don't remember, but I'm sure he jumped on top of me in the swimming pool when doing a handball. Because we, right? I mean,
That's why you're so small.
I know. Well, I remember Eloise watering Jerry, hoping he would grow. I actually, so Jerry and I became very close, good friends, and I would go there for dinner, or I would be there in the afternoons, and Eloise would say, do you want to stay? And I would say, oh, sure, let me check with my mom or whatever. And then Jerry would come to our house, and my mother was one of the stay-at-home moms who baked cookies, and so Jerry would come over and have cookies and milk or whatever. And so we were basically, I was at his house, so he was at mine. And, it's just, she was a very wonderful, gracious woman, and just so, to me, it was she represented this whole world that I didn't, my parents were sort of fuddy-duddies, I thought, And so to me, she was this elegant, sophisticated woman that actually worked. My mother never worked. And it just had a huge impact on my life. It was so, and so welcoming, and, when we were going to, we went to Cal, right? We went to Berkeley. And, we went and stayed with her parents. We were checking things out, and I got to meet her grandkids. And I always felt so welcome. So, then Jerry and I went to Berkeley. I stayed. Jerry moved to LA, and I kind of lost touch. When Jerry let me know that he was marrying Janet, and I said, who? And he said, Janet. And it's like, oh, Janet. That Janet. And I got invited to the wedding, and I said I would go, and then at the very last minute, for some personal reasons, had to not make it. And I forget if she texted me, or no, she didn't text. I think she sent me an email. It was like, Eloise was like, oh, we're so disappointed. And I thought, oh, God. I mean, I didn't mind disappointing Jerry and Janet, but this So, anyway, she was just, that period of time in my life, it just left a huge impact. And I'm so sorry to see I've gone on it. But thank you for having us. So, okay, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, so here's an early memory of Owen, not to digress, but it's like 6 in the morning in winter in Bakersfield, and it's foggy, and I'm hearing this on the window. I look outside, there's Owen in sweat clothes, and he's run over to our house. Remember this, Owen? And then Jerry's gonna get up and run back with him to his house, and then Jerry's gonna run home alone, so they can get in shape. Were you in high school already, or getting ready for high school? In high school. Jerry's like sound asleep. Owen's pounding on the window. And then I thought they were crazy. That's all I can say. And by the way, so, Colin went to Cal, and Erica went to Cal, and Tim went to Cal, and Owen went to Cal.
Me too.
Janet went to Cal, and Sean and Brian went to UCLA. But they could have gone to Cal. SC?
Okay, I got it.
Do you have to say something? Yeah, I think so, right? Defend yourself.
My name is Kay Pitts. I know Eloise from an early wine society at her Ben's wine shop. If you remember back when we had the wine shop over on Oak Street. And then we had the more wine and the music group and a little gourmet group. So one story about the gourmet group. Most everybody who's in that group is gone now, except for Sue Deininger and Leonard. But it was a wonderful group. But the deal was the host or hostess would set a theme, and you would bring a certain dish, like appetizer, and the host would do the main dish. So for Eloise, it'd be, I'm doing Hawaiian one, and Brian, who does most of the cooking in my house, Brian, you need to bring an appetizer, and you need to make this thing that uses banana leaves, and he goes to this forest and you pick him up there, where we found out actually it's poison on him, but that's, And she's been doing that for a lot of years, getting from a florist, so I'm sorry. So she was always the one, you bring this one, and we always said, wine and food was wonderful. But now it makes a lot of sense to me. When she was moving out of her house, she gave me a call and had me come over, and she gave me all of her USC winesware and stuff. Now I understand why. So I have it.
Oh, that's funny. All right, anything else? Anybody? Going once, going twice? Well, once again, we have Janet to thank for, what do you say, Dirty? 99% of it? Well, Joan made cookies. 90% and 10%. Thanks so much, Janet. It was well done and a nice celebration. I probably would have been sadder had it been a year ago, but now I'm just sort of happy and fond memories and those sorts of things. So thanks for coming. Have some more wine. There's lots of cookies. Eat cookies. Thanks. Bye.
Photo.